I really wanted to take one step forward towards this vision that I had. So eventually I pulled the plug and I quit with no backup plan. So a few months ago, I made a video about my reflections on 4 years of working at Notion. And since then, I got some, comments and questions from you guys like, when did you know it was the right time to leave? And do you regret it? So I wanted to make a video to really help break down why I quit, the factors that I considered as I was making my decision. Also, what is it like on the other side a few months later? And I know a decision to quit a company is highly personal, but if you are considering leaving your job or wondering, should I do that thing that I've always wanted to do? I hope that my story can be one data point as you make your decision. Let's get into it. Okay, why I quit. Whenever I asked myself the question, what kind of impact do I want to make for the rest of my career? Honestly, two very specific things came to my mind. And the first one was, I think I want to go back into the healthcare industry. Number two, I want to start my own company. And I actually had this insight fairly early on-ish during my time at Notion, but I always put it aside because it never felt like the right time. And honestly, looking back, it really wasn't the right time. And a pretty solid method to help assess if your current job is right for you is to list out your career values and assess how your current job, role, and company is meeting those values. So as an example, my personal career values are challenge, learning, impact, and connection. And for the majority of my time there, my values were certainly being met, some more, some less, over time. But I think during my last year there, I started to realize that those values were just not as aligned anymore as they were before. During that process, that inner intuition of what I actually wanted just got stronger and stronger to the point it was just hard to ignore. But also, it was pretty clear to me that I didn't want to work for another company and just get another job. I really wanted to take one step forward towards this vision that I had. So eventually, I pulled the plug and I quit with no backup plan. Sometimes quitting a job can be pretty straightforward. Maybe the company is toxic and you hate your job. Or maybe a better opportunity comes your way. But other times, it seems like everything is saying not to quit, but your inner intuition is telling you to quit. To be honest, this felt one of those times for me. And I think the reason why it was actually very difficult for me to leave and pull that trigger was that, number one, I was in a very lucrative role at a company whose future I really believed in and I still believe in to this day. Two, I didn't have anything lined up. Not a job, not initial few customers or signs of traction or anything like that. I really just wanted to give myself permission to rest and the freedom to explore my options. And with all that said, I really considered a lot of factors, both external and also internal, that ultimately led me to leave the company. So the first external factor is finances. And I know some people kind of just quit without needing to really think about it or have a safety net. For me, if this wasn't taken care of, this whole scenario of quitting was completely moot. So personally, this is how I approached it. Number one, calculating my monthly expenses. In other words, how much do you spend every month? And what is an amount that is comfortable-ish so that you're not stressing out, but at the same time, you're on a tighter budget. Step two is to calculate your runway. In other words, how long will you need to be financially covered for, assuming that you don't have any other money coming in, right? So take that total number of monthly expenses times the number of months. And then step three is to really assess your financial risk tolerance. And I feel like this one is highly personal. It's kind of like when they talk about, how big should my emergency savings be? Should it be 3, 6, or 9 months? And I feel like there's no right answer, right? Because it really depends on your circumstance. And I think for me, growing up in a family that has always struggled financially, I knew that I was very prone to financial stress. I wanted to save up a minimum of 1 year runway because that's an arbitrary timeline of how much I'm giving myself to really figure out what I want to do, plus extra for emergencies and wiggle room in case I want to go more than 1 year. So that's how I approached it. But again, this is different for everyone. However, when you're planning this, be mindful that the trap here, and it's easy to fall into this, especially when you're feeling fear or doubt, is that you always want more money. Be honest with yourself. Like, how much money do you actually need? Like, literally 2 months before I left, I was like, oh, wait. I think I need like 3 years of runway. I almost let that deter my original decision to leave, but I had to just sit there and be like, you know what? Nah, I think that's my fear talking. Is your milestone for your savings of what you would need to feel comfortable in order to leave, is it constantly moving? And maybe you just didn't forecast it correctly and it actually needs to be more, but maybe not. So just be honest with yourself. Number 2, non-negotiable milestones. For me, during my time at Notion, I had very specific goals and milestones that I wanted to achieve and experience during my time there. One of my goals was to experience what is it like to lead a team and really understand for myself, do I like to manage people? What is my leadership style? Like, what are my strengths and weaknesses in regards to managing people? Also, a lot of other goals as well. But near the end of my time, I remember I kind of just realized like, oh, I don't think I have anything to prove anymore. And that was just such a weird thought for me. But it was funny, like shortly after I had that thought, I was having a conversation with my then manager just about burnout in general. And this was like close to when I actually end up leaving. And he told me like, Jenny, you don't have to prove anything to anyone here. Like, you tell me what you want, maybe you want a different role or move, we can work on that. And it was just funny to hear that from him, like the same exact words that I realized for myself without even telling him that. It made me realize like, oh, maybe this was true a lot earlier than I initially realized and believed for myself. And I think the trap for this external factor of milestones is there's always another fucking milestone, especially for you high achievers out there. Like, there will always be another feather to add to your hat, another person or leader or executive to impress, but for what? For me, I found myself falling into this trap, especially when I felt low confidence or when I needed that validation, especially when I had thoughts of like, oh, am I not really cut out for what I'm trying to do? Am I stupid for thinking I can even do this? Right? So you just want to add more notches to your belt. But at the end of the day, I really realized, and I am still continuing to tell myself, that the person that needs to believe in me the most is actually myself. So the third external factor is family. And I think looking back, besides money, family was probably the only other factor that actually mattered to me. And I talked about my, first generation immigrant experience growing up a few times on this channel. There is this expectation / reality that you are responsible either partially or wholly for your parents' retirement. And for me, I realized that I had to have a very honest conversation with my parents about their retirement and just letting them know that, hey, if I move forward with wanting to take a risk with my career, this also may or may not impact my ability to provide for you in the future. And I felt like I had to get this sense of permission from them that I can actually take this risk and do this for myself. But I didn't even think that I needed any kind of permission per se. And even though nothing was solved, I think just having that conversation in the first place lifted such a mental and emotional burden off of me. And for the first time, I felt more excitement than fear about quitting. And I just want to be clear too, it's not that, my parents are forcing it down my throat or anything with these expectations to help them with their retirement. Not only do I just see it as like a necessary reality, I also want to help as well. And it does serve a big motivation for me in a way that has carried me throughout my career. And I think the trap for this external factor of family is, I was actually very close not going forward with having that conversation conversation because other family members were telling me that, we don't think it's the right time to have this conversation. Their retirement is is so much years away. And I know they were coming from the best intent, but I realized for me that this was a non-negotiable, and I needed to have this expectation and set my boundaries in order for me to move forward. Had I not, I honestly think I probably would have delayed my decision to leave. I had this friend who literally begged me not to quit. And sometimes I started questioning my sanity for giving that up and putting my savings on. The failure to be present in your current moment truly robs you of the learnings and the opportunities that are very much real.